"You must be mistaken, ma'am. I don't know you." Those words sliced through me like a knife. My own son, my only child, stood in his graduation gown, flanked by his polished friends and his elegant girlfriend, and he denied me as if I were some stranger off the street. I had been clutching a small bouquet of sunflowers, their stems wrapped in cheap brown paper. They suddenly felt like bricks in my trembling hands. Around us, students and parents bustled toward the auditorium, but a sharp silence seemed to close in around me. I caught the raised eyebrows of a professor nearby, the quick smirk from one of Ethan's classmates, and the way his girlfriend tugged at his sleeve, whispering, "We're going to be late." I wanted to speak to protest, to remind him who had worked nights scrubbing floors so he could stand here in that robe, but my voice caught in my throat. My son avoided my eyes, his jaw tight, his hand adjusting the cap on his head as if I were invisible. The security usher glanced at me, frowning as though I were some uninvited guest disturbing the order of the day. Shame burned across my face. My feet felt nailed to the ground, and yet the world seemed to move on without me. Laughter spilling down the steps, flashes of cameras, families embracing proudly. I forced my legs to carry me toward the very back rows of the hall. Each step felt heavier than the last. I lowered myself into a chair, clutching the sunflowers to my chest, their bright heads bobbing foolishly, while tears stung my eyes. In that moment, I had never felt smaller, more unwanted. I had given my life to raise him, but here I was, banished to the shadows, on the day that was supposed to be our triumph. And yet, deep inside, a quiet thought whispered, "This is not the end of my story." My name is Linda Parker, and I am 54 years old. For most of my life, I worked long hours in jobs that left me exhausted but proud. I cleaned offices late into the night, swept floors and polished windows before sunrise, and never once complained. Every dollar I earned, every moment of sleep I sacrificed, was for my son Ethan. From the moment he was born, I made it my mission to give him a better life than the one I had. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My parents worked hard, but life was always tight, and I learned early that nothing in this world is handed to you. When Ethan was a baby, I held 2 jobs just to make sure he had diapers, milk, and warmth. There were nights I ate only bread to save enough for him to have cereal the next morning. I wanted him to know security, even if it meant I would know hunger. Ethan's childhood was filled with laughter games in the backyard and bedtime stories. I remember sitting by his crib at night, whispering that he could grow up to be anything he wanted. I scrimped and saved so he could have books, new shoes, and eventually a laptop for schoolwork. I never told him how many times I skipped doctor visits or fixed my shoes with tape because I needed that money for him. My life became a quiet rhythm of labor and love. When Ethan entered high school, I opened a small cleaning business, Silver Maple Cleaning, determined to give him a future beyond the walls I scrubbed. It started with one client, a local school, and grew slowly. I poured my heart into it, but I never boasted. I wanted him to focus on his studies, to believe in himself, not in my sacrifices. Yet as he got older, something shifted. He became embarrassed by my work. I overheard him whispering to friends, "My mom, she's a janitor." It hurt, but I stayed silent. I never sought recognition. I simply wanted Ethan to succeed. He applied to Riverbend University with dreams of business school, and I promised him that we would find a way, no matter the struggle. I took loans, dipped into savings, and even used the little profit from my cleaning company to make sure he could attend the best programs. Each late night, each aching muscle was worth seeing him walk toward his future. And now, sitting in that hall after all the years of sacrifice, I am invisible. My heart aches not because of exhaustion, but because my son refuses to acknowledge the woman who carried him, fed him, and cheered for every small triumph. The irony is painful. The child I raised, nurtured, and believed in sees me as a stranger on the day that should have celebrated both our journeys. I clutch my sunflowers tighter, feeling the rough edges of the paper against my palms, and I remind myself silently, this story is far from over. The chapters ahead may hold the recognition and justice I have waited for all these years. The days leading up to graduation had been tense, though I tried to remain optimistic. I reminded myself that no matter how cold Ethan had grown, this milestone was still ours to share, a symbol of everything I had worked for. Yet each interaction with him lately felt like walking on shards of glass. Ethan's friends had become a subtle influence, pushing him to distance himself from the life I had built. One evening, while helping him pack for the dorm, he said, "Mom, maybe don't post anything about this on social media. People don't need to know about us." His words were polite, but the shame behind them stung sharper than any insult I had ever endured. I swallowed the hurt, nodding silently, my hands trembling. Then there was Madison, his girlfriend, always impeccably dressed, always with a sharp word or an eye roll ready. She had a way of looking at me that felt like she could see all my flaws and judge them mercilessly. "He's going to be fine without the old stories," she whispered to him once when I was in the kitchen. I tried to smile politely, but her condescension was palpable. It wasn't just their words, it was the little things that cut deeper. Invitations to family dinners suddenly came with caveats. "Mom, please don't embarrass me in front of my friends." Gifts I had painstakingly prepared were barely acknowledged, sometimes left on the side of the table. I had spent hours sewing a cap cover for his graduation gown, adding a small charm that had been his childhood token, only for it to be brushed aside with a distracted glance. I had to accept painfully that Ethan had internalized their disdain. He began making subtle yet cruel choices. The announcement he sent to classmates about his scholarship failed to mention the sacrifices I had made or the countless nights I had worked to pay for his tuition. He described his success as though he had carved it out entirely on his own, leaving me as a silent, unseen shadow in his narrative. Even our conversations became strained exercises in diplomacy. One night I suggested he invite me to a rehearsal dinner for his ceremony, and he said flatly, "It's not really necessary, Mom. People might judge." Judge. The word echoed in my mind. I had devoted my life to this child, and yet I was treated as if I were a burden. The tipping point came on the morning of graduation. I arrived early carrying my modest bouquet, rehearsing a quiet, proud smile. I hoped that perhaps, in front of his professors and classmates, he would remember the years of devotion, the nights of sacrifice, the unwavering presence of a mother who had loved without conditions. But that hope was fleeting. When Ethan caught sight of me standing at the back of the hall, his face hardened. He looked around at the crowd, then back at me, and his expression was clear: he would not acknowledge me. His friends snickered softly. His girlfriend smirked, and even the faculty's eyes flickered, with a mixture of surprise and discomfort. That single moment crystallized the pattern of rejection, the culmination of years of emotional distance and social pressure. My heart ached with a mixture of sorrow and indignation. Every instinct told me to storm forward, to grab his arm and demand recognition, but I restrained myself. I allowed him to believe for now that I was invisible, while internally I steeled my resolve. This was not the end. The story I had lived, the sacrifices I had made, and the quiet strength I had nurtured over decades would soon speak louder than his denial. Sitting in the back row, clutching the sunflowers, I rehearsed in my mind the truth I had kept hidden, the proof of my perseverance, my quiet victories, and the foundation I had laid not just for Ethan, but for the countless students who had benefited from my efforts. If he refused to see me now, he would soon witness the undeniable reality of who I truly was. The whispers, the smirks, and the thinly veiled judgments of others only fueled the determination in me. I realized in that moment that the greatest lesson I could teach him was not with words or protests, but with presence and undeniable action. The coming ceremony would not only celebrate Ethan's achievements, it would mark the moment when I too would be recognized, not as a shadow or a stranger, but as the woman who had quietly shaped his world. The ceremony began with the usual pomp and grandeur. The auditorium buzzed with excitement, families cheering, caps fluttering in the air, the sweet scent of fresh flowers mingling with polished wood and new upholstery. I stayed seated at the back, my sunflowers resting on my lap, and watched as students filed onto the stage one by one, their achievements announced with pride. Ethan's turn came. He rose from his seat, walked with a confident stride, and approached the stage. I could see the sparkle of pride in the parents seated around him, the smiles of classmates who had been with him for years. But my presence, my quiet hope was ignored. He did not look in my direction. His eyes scanned the crowd, pausing briefly on familiar faces, yet when they reached me, he turned away. "You must be mistaken, ma'am," he said again, his voice carrying across the hall. "I don't know you." The words landed like stones in my chest. Gasps rippled through the nearby rows. Some students froze mid-applause. Parents exchanged confused glances. Even the professor seated at the front looked startled, his hand hovering over the program in disbelief. I could see Madison's satisfied smirk, her shoulders straight, and head held high, convinced she had solidified her influence over him. My heart raced pounding with a mix of humiliation and anger. I felt the sting of betrayal, the years of sleepless nights and endless labor condensed into those few words. For a moment I was paralyzed, a spectator to my own heartbreak, while Ethan stood tall, oblivious to the life he had almost erased. But then, as the dean stepped forward to announce the next part of the program, a subtle change occurred. Dr. Claudia Romero, the MC, called out, "We would like to acknowledge our special scholarship donor for the Beacon Promise Scholarship, whose generosity has made it possible for countless students to achieve their dreams." A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the stage. And there I was. My name, Linda Parker, echoed through the auditorium. Shock flashed across Ethan's face. His friends froze their mouths slightly open. Madison's smirk vanished, replaced by confusion and disbelief. I rose from my seat, clutching my sunflowers, my hands steady despite the rush of adrenaline. Every eye in the room was now on me. The whispers began soft at first, then louder as recognition spread. I walked toward the stage, each step deliberate, every movement commanding attention. I reached the podium, cleared my throat, and addressed the crowd with a calm, unwavering voice. For years, I have worked quietly to support students who aspire to achieve beyond their circumstances. This scholarship represents the dedication, sacrifice, and love that so many parents give every day, often without acknowledgement. Today, I am proud to see one of those students, my son, among those we honor. The room fell silent. Ethan, once so self-assured, looked at me with wide eyes, realization dawning too late. He had denied me, ignored me, and yet here I stood, not just recognized, but celebrated for the very contributions he had dismissed. In that moment, the humiliation of earlier faded, replaced by the undeniable truth: my life, my sacrifices, and my quiet victories were visible to everyone. I had taken the stage, and there was no denying my presence. The auditorium remained in stunned silence as I continued. I could feel every eye on me, every whispered question hanging in the air. For years I had remained invisible to my son, hidden in the background of his life. But now the truth would no longer be concealed. I am the founder and silent benefactor of the Beacon Promise Scholarship I announced. Many of you here tonight are walking the stage thanks to this fund. It was established to help first-generation students, students who might otherwise never reach this moment. I have watched quietly without recognition, ensuring that deserving students receive the support they need to follow their dreams. The reaction was instantaneous. Gasps, murmurs, and a collective intake of breath swept through the room. Students turned to each other, parents whispered, and professors exchanged stunned glances. Ethan's confident posture faltered, his jaw tightening as his eyes widened in disbelief. The girlfriend, Madison, clutched his arm, her earlier smirk replaced by astonishment. I looked directly at him, my voice steady, carrying both authority and quiet dignity. "Ethan, the child you see before you, who is standing as a student today, is here because of opportunities that I made possible. You may have believed I was irrelevant, but the truth is undeniable. I have shaped futures, including yours." I saw the shock ripple across the faces of everyone in the room. Friends who had mocked my absence or dismissed my contributions now looked at me with admiration, awe, and in some cases, regret. Ethan stepped back slightly as if the floor beneath him had shifted. The years of denial, of embarrassment, of trying to distance himself from me collided with the undeniable proof of my presence and influence. As I spoke, I felt a quiet sense of triumph mixed with relief. This moment was not about revenge or humiliation. It was about truth and recognition. The scholarship represented countless nights of labor, careful budgeting, and sacrifices I had made without fanfare or expectation. And now the reality of that dedication was clear to all. I concluded my brief speech with a smile that carried both warmth and quiet authority. I have worked quietly for many years, unseen but always present. Today you know who I am. I will continue to support those who strive, who work hard, and who deserve the chance to succeed. Let this be a reminder that true influence is measured not by recognition, but by the impact we leave behind. Ethan remained frozen, unable to look away, unable to deny the truth. The audience erupted in applause, acknowledging both my presence and the work I had done. In that moment, I realized that years of invisibility had culminated in undeniable visibility. I was no longer the unnoticed mother at the back of the hall. I was the force behind the futures of so many students, and even my own son had no choice but to recognize it. The applause filled the auditorium, echoing off the walls, and for the first time that day, I felt the weight of years lift from my shoulders. I stepped down from the podium, holding my bouquet of sunflowers, feeling a quiet satisfaction that went far beyond the recognition of my son or anyone else in the room. This was about reclaiming dignity, proving the truth, and showing that a lifetime of quiet labor could not be erased by denial or embarrassment. Backstage, Ethan approached me hesitantly, his face pale, his eyes avoiding direct contact. "Mom, I didn't know," he began, his voice faltering. Madison lingered behind him, clearly uncomfortable, as if she realized the foundations of the image she had built around him were crumbling. I looked at Ethan calmly, letting him feel the gravity of his actions without needing to raise my voice. "Ethan," I said, "I have loved you every day of your life. I have sacrificed everything so you could stand here. But love does not mean allowing yourself to be invisible. You have a choice now: acknowledge the truth or continue in denial. The consequences of your choices are yours to bear." He swallowed, hard words failing him. For the first time, the full extent of his neglect, his embarrassment, and his lack of gratitude became painfully clear to him. It was a lesson he could no longer avoid. He could no longer pretend that the years of my sacrifice had been inconsequential. I turned toward the rest of the students and parents waiting backstage, the faculty watching closely. "This scholarship," I continued, "requires more than academic excellence. It requires respect for others' dedication and a willingness to give back to the community. Every recipient will spend time volunteering, learning that true success is measured not by what you take, but by what you give." Including the child I raised, the one standing there just now, he will also participate fully in these requirements. Ethan's shoulders slumped. I could see the immediate realization that his behavior had consequences. His friends had looked on with smugness during the ceremony, but now the tables had turned. The recognition he had once sought was conditional upon his acknowledgement of reality, upon stepping into responsibility. Madison squeezed his arm silently, urging compliance, though her earlier confidence had vanished. In the following days, Ethan began to make amends. He issued a public acknowledgement of my contributions on his social media, recognizing the sacrifices I had made and the impact of my quiet dedication. He spent hours volunteering, helping other students in the scholarship program understand the value of service, respect, and humility. It was not easy for him, but the experience instilled a new understanding, a respect for the foundation he had once taken for granted. I, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. I expanded the scholarship program, mentoring parents like me, guiding them to support their children without sacrificing their own dignity. I organized workshops on budgeting, education planning, and volunteerism, ensuring that others could benefit from my experiences. My life, once defined by invisible labor, was now visible in meaningful ways, recognized not only by my son, but by the entire community. Through this experience, I learned that love is powerful, but self-respect and dignity are equally essential. Sacrifice does not mean erasure, and loyalty does not require subjugation. By standing firmly, by letting the truth be known, I reclaimed my place, not as a forgotten figure in my son's life, but as a woman whose efforts shaped futures, including his own. The lesson for anyone watching is clear. Do not let the lack of recognition diminish your worth. Stand tall, speak your truth, and let your actions speak louder than denial or ignorance. True influence comes from dedication, consistency, and the courage to claim what you rightfully deserve. I walked away from that graduation ceremony that day with pride, not just for my son's accomplishments, but for the strength I had found in myself. I was no longer invisible. I had reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so, I had ensured that my legacy of love, sacrifice, and quiet power would be remembered for generations. As I walked out of the auditorium that day, I carried more than just the bouquet of sunflowers in my hands. I carried the weight of decades of sacrifice, resilience, and love finally acknowledged. The shock, the humiliation, and the denial I had endured faded, replaced by a quiet pride that only comes from standing firmly in the truth. I realized that a lifetime of invisible labor of working tirelessly behind the scenes does not go unnoticed forever. Ethan had learned a lesson he could never forget. The pride he once felt in his achievements was now inseparable from the recognition of those who made them possible. My presence on that stage reminded him and everyone watching that love and dedication are not measured by applause, but by the unwavering commitment to others, even when they refuse to acknowledge it. This story is not just about me or my son. It is about the countless people who sacrifice quietly, who are ignored or dismissed by those closest to them, who navigate the complexities of a toxic family dynamic. True respect comes from understanding the value of others and honoring their contributions. To anyone watching, remember this stand. Tall, speak your truth, and never allow denial or ingratitude to diminish your worth. The courage to claim your dignity and the persistence to act with integrity will ultimately shape not just your own story, but the legacy you leave for others. Recognition, respect, and love may come late, but when they do, they resonate far deeper than any moment of fleeting shame.